What's up guys, Lifting here. We're now about 2 weeks or so into Betrayal League, and build guides featuring the new or changed skills have started to pop up. In this video I am going to feature 5 of such builds for you to check out and to get inspired by. And of course make sure to hit the subscribe button for more content like this in case you want to see it in the future. Thank you. Build number 1 on the list is by Ghazzy, and it is a Winter Orb Elementalist. Winter Orb is one of the new skills added with the Betrayal expansion, and it has been received very well by the community so far. Winter Orb is a channeling skill, and it draws big parallels between itself and Blade Vortex. The main difference is that Winter Orb is considered a channeling skill, and instead of having knives circling around the character dealing physical damage, Winter Orb instead shoots frost projectiles towards nearby enemies. Besides that, both skills share the similarities of being a spell, which scales of AoE, and they both benefit from having increased duration modifiers, not to mention cast speed. Both skills can reach 10 charges or stages, and the higher the better. For Winter Orb this translates higher frequency of projectile shot and added base duration for the skill. Ghazzy's build utilize the Acrobatics keystones for defense and the Elementalist ascendancy, leading into Mastermind of Discord and Beacon of Ruin, to not only apply a ton of damage, but also to reduce the mana reserved of the Herald abilities and to increase the damage effectiveness of Shaarq. Amongst others, the build features items such as the Winds of Change gloves and the Dying Sun flask, primarily due to the way they interact with the projectiles. Build number 2 on the list is by XenoPOE, and it is another Elementalist, also using Winter Orb, but this version incorporates the Cast While Channeling gem and Ice Spear. So unlike Ghazzy's setup, which alone relies on Winter Orb to deal the damage, Xeno's setup also uses Ice Spear. The way it works is to pair Winter Orb with the Cast While Channeling support gem and add in Ice Spear. This makes it so that anytime you start casting Winter Orb, due to it being a channeling skill, it will activate the Cast While Channeling support gem, which then procs Ice Spear, automating the process for you. Both Winter Orb and Ice Spear are considered projectile, cold-aligned spells, and does thus scale very similarly, meaning that for the remaining support gems you can add to the setup, it is very likely you will be able to scale both skills very effectively. Xeno's setup makes use of Mind Over Matter for defense and features items such as the Lawweave body armor and, like Ghazzy's, also a Dying Sun flask for the extra projectiles. I'm personally playing a Winter Orb build myself right now that I'll be sharing with you guys in the coming days, and my experience with this skill has thus far been absolutely fantastic, and I highly recommend that you consider trying this build out at least, or trying out Winter Orb I mean. However, it is important that before you do so, if you're new to the game, that you make sure to try and understand the duration, projectile and cast speed mechanics and how they interact with Winter Orb, as it is a skill that requires a bit of maintenance and fiddling around with to make it feel good, at least in the beginning or early on in the game. It is also the type of skill that greatly benefits from at least having a tabula laying around, as each support gem has major impact on the performance of the skill, unlike some other skills that does perfectly fine on a 5-link early on. The third build on the list is by Kraiwen, and it features the new Stormbrain skill played as the Elementalist. Yes, Elementalists are very popular these days, which in due part can be explained by the fact that this ascendancy in general provide great league start utility, unlike some of the other ascendancies that benefit from a less restrictive budget, so to speak. This particular Elementalist uses the new Stormbrain skill together with the utility skill Brain Recall. With Stormbrain you can by default cast 3 brains. Each of these brains can attach to one enemy. While attached, these Stormbrains will periodically activate and fire at nearby enemies and those around them. When the enemy the brain is attached to dies, the brain will detach, and if there are other enemies nearby, it will attach to one of those, continuing to exert its effect on that target. To bring the brains with you, the Brain Recall skill is used. By using this, your currently active brains will get called to your destination, allowing them to attach to enemies in this area. This is to prevent you from having to constantly recast the brain skills anytime you encounter a new group of monsters further down the road, and to force an activation of the brains as you do so. If you have played summoners in the past, think of it as a slightly different convocation skill. Kraiwen's build use both Mind Over Matter and both acrobatic nodes for defense and picks up Runebinder to increase the default maximum amount of 1 brand attached to enemies to 2 instead for a very significant damage boost. As for notable gear, Kraiwen is using the newly buffed Carcass Jack for a massive increase to area of effect and damage. Coming up fourth on the list is Shaarq's Armageddon Brand Trickster build. So we don't need to go over how the brain skills work again, but the thing that separates Armageddon Brand to Storm Brand, as you just saw, is that while Armageddon Brand is attached, instead of firing beams towards enemies, it instead calls down meteors from the sky. Another slight difference is, of course, also that while Storm Brand deals lightning damage, Armageddon Brand, you guessed it, deals fire damage. Shaarq's build focuses on creating big ignites and thus burning enemies to death. This is possible by having a high chance to ignite and pairing Armageddon Brand with the Ignite Proliferation Support gem, which, well, basically proliferates ignites onto nearby enemies and thus making them burn too. Paired with the Trickster Ascendancy, this allows for some significant damage over time bonuses, not to mention mana modifiers, which goes to support Mind Over Matter that this build also utilizes for defense. The build even incorporates minion nodes, but not for the reason you may think at first. With Spiritual Aid and Spiritual Command picked up, any of the skill nodes that grants minion damage and or attack speed also applies to your character. This means that the minion clusters picked up here now goes to buff your Armageddon Brand damage and provide you with some attack speed for your movement skill ability, which in this case is Shield Charge. Of notable items, it's worth mentioning that Shaarq's build makes use of the Balefire unique Opal Scepter, which implicitly grants a level 25 Scorching Ray. This is then paired with the Spell Totem support gem and a couple of damage modifiers to provide some powerful Scorching Ray totems, which further goes to help with single target damage both directly but also indirectly by lowering enemies' fire resistances. This is definitely an interesting take on Armageddon Brand, also due to the fact that we very rarely see proper Ignite builds anymore. Pretty cool. The fifth and final build on the list is a Tectonic Slam Juggernaut by Sleevelessless. Alongside a bunch of other skills, Tectonic Slam also received some pretty significant buffs in this patch. Instead of consuming an endurance charge per attack as it did pre-patch, Tectonic Slam now has a 35% chance to consume an endurance charge, and in doing so it will fuel a charged slam, which then deals 60% more damage as opposed to before where it only dealt 18% more damage. Tectonic Slam by itself converts 60% of physical damage and works by unleashing fissures on the ground, dealing damage to enemies in front of your character. When an endurance charge is consumed, a charged slam is unleashed, creating fissures which covers a much larger area and dealing 60% more damage as opposed to the regular attacks. Sleevelessness's build is played as the Juggernaut for easy endurance charge generation to fuel the cost of Tectonic Slam and to greatly improve defensive capabilities, while also granting big bonuses to area of effect and damage. The build also incorporates the newly buffed Daresos Defiance armor for that heavy buff to Onslaught, and for weapons the build uses 2 Razors of the 7th Sun swords. This sword also received a buff in 3.5, and together with Tectonic's implicit fire conversion, the build ends up being able to convert 100% of the damage dealt into fire damage, while also benefiting from the burn, life recovery and melee physical damage bonuses that these swords also provide. And those were the 5 builds I wanted to present today. Sorry guys, no bonus builds this time. I'd love to know if you have played any of the new skills yourself, and if so, how was your experience in doing so? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you. Also feel free to visit us on Discord. We have a very active community discussing and helping people out with Path of Exile. Come visit me on Twitch for the live action, and if you are feeling extra generous, check out my Patreon page or throw your Twitch Prime in my direction. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?